We all know how important storytelling is, but there are three things that people sometimes forget about. Number one, strategy. Everything has to lock back to your strategy. Number two, authenticity. Authenticity is key, and we have to pull it through in everything that we film or record. And number three, I think the most important, connection. You have to connect to your audience in a very intentional way. And that's the one that people mostly forget about. So, for all those reasons, this is going to be a great episode.
Hey, small business owners, welcome to Unleashing Video Marketing for Businesses, where we dive deep into the world of video marketing as top experts reveal their secrets and strategies to power up your growth. Ready to elevate your business? Then get set, camera speed, and action. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the last episode of Season 3 of UVMB. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, Unleashing Video Marketing for Businesses is a space designed to give you the best tips, strategies, and tools on how to leverage video the right way to scale your business. I'm your host, Frank Battiston, and the Director of Production at PowerTale Productions. And today we have a beloved and cherished guest and longtime collaborator, Zuzy Martin. And she is a creative strategist, filmmaker, and communication specialist. We go a long way. We have done corporate videos and 2 documentaries, and she has a lot to say about the way you need to tell stories so that they make a difference in your marketing efforts. Here you go. Zuzy, it's been a long time due. Thank you so much for being here in our podcast. How are you today?
Good. Is this considered work? Because I already feel like we're having fun. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, we always have fun. And this is not the first time we meet each other. We've worked in so many different projects and a couple of documentaries, which we will mention later. But yeah, I wanted to start just for the audience here to know who you are. You've done so much from advertising. You've done a couple of documentaries. You get involved in so many projects. And if there's anything that I've always admired of you is that you know the deep and outs of storytelling. And this is why we're here, because we want to focus on knowing those tips and tricks you have, in terms of storytelling, but specifically focused on small businesses. So just let's start for them to know, who you are.
Well, thank you again for having me.
Of course.
And I am these days, I am a hybrid, and I've done a lot of things. So it's always interesting to find a way to describe yourself, So what do I put on LinkedIn? So yes, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, I'm a strategist. So right now I love the term creative strategist, because strategy is always at the core of everything that I do, whether it's producing a documentary or developing a communication plan for companies. So yes, creative strategy.
Okay, that's great. And in terms of storytelling techniques that a lot of, let's just say, businesses could borrow from the documentary space, because you travel from, like I said, advertising, and now you're a producer, and now you're a strategist, so I think it's like a compilation of so much knowledge put together. What techniques or what tips could you just give us in your experience?
Yeah, so for me, filmmaking and documentary style producing is all about storytelling, like you said. And I think people need to remember that right now, at this moment in time, I feel that we as a society are craving connection. We're still kind of in a post-COVID hangover where the connection is not as strong as it was before. So Docu-Style content is so powerful because people are either listening or watching a very singular idea or story. So it is a great opportunity to connect. The thing that I think about all the time is that a lot of companies that I work with, they bring me in because there's so much money put into strategy and at the high executive level, whether it's a small business or a large business, there's so much that goes into it, so many talented people that work on these things. And for some reason, communications gets put on the back burner. Connecting that strategy to the audience in a very intentional way is critical. And docu-style productions, and all the different sort of tactics, whether it's podcasts or a film or short vignettes, or pulling that through in many different ways. Those are all different ways you can do it. Those are different assets that you can create, but they're so important to connecting the dots from the C-suite
Mm.
to the people, to your audience, whether it's customers or your internal audiences.
I've sorry, I've always thought that you're an amazing communicator, one of the best
Mm-hmm.
ones, that we worked with, sincerely. And yes, I do agree that communication is one of those things that you leave behind when you create a project. And you have no idea how many times during different episodes of the podcast we actually foment that. We actually promote that, to just have the not the owner of the company, but whoever is interacting with different creators or when creating a specific piece, to be very communicative, because sometimes people think that just, and this is in terms of workflow, not actually the messaging, which is the other level you were talking about just now.
Yes. So connecting the strategy to the story, or understanding the strategy. So as the story organically comes out, you keep that in mind. That's really important. But yeah, I mean, I like to think of it of every single beautiful asset that you create, whether it's talking to another human being, in many forms. You have to develop a little campaign around that. I mean, marketing is what we've called it forever. You have to create a marketing campaign, some kind of plan to make sure you get the most out of that beautiful asset that you're creating. So I think that's very important, because people stop when they're creating something for, let's say it's a live event with all their employees,
Mm-hmm.
or they're capturing a video to tell a story about one of their employees or many of their employees. And then they stop there. They don't think about, how can I really have this connect in the most powerful ways? And that's more than one way. There's more than one way to do that. So I always like to think, especially now, especially now, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we all are craving more connection. So yeah.
Definitely. And, one of the types of marketing that I really like talking about with other guests is emotional marketing, from campaigns to ads of different kinds. And it's all about connection, like you said, So when you connect to your customers or your audience emotionally, and it goes to that deeper level, I think you're able to pretty much not only sell yourself, but your products or your services in a unique way that actually people really believe in. I'm not sure if you have some examples of your work where you can tell us where you actually basically worked on that project and went to a very deep emotional level to be able to connect to the audience, and why you did it.
Yeah, I have a couple of examples. One of them, I can't say the name of the client, but it was during COVID. It was during COVID, and the audience needed to be seen. They needed to be heard, and we developed a very emotional black and white, because all of these things, as you know, as filmmakers, make a difference. So we're getting the right tone, the right feeling, the right look. And then I sat and I interviewed 5 or 6 employees, and we told stories that at the end of the day, they were so powerful. I had to hold my breath so that I wouldn't cry, because it was so emotional. And that's happened to me many times. No, I'm an empath, so that's what makes me good at interviewing, because I feel like the most important thing when creating these, whether it's a film or documentary or any kind of video asset or audio asset, is to really try and connect with the subject, and to offer them not only respect, but understanding and your full attention. And that usually relaxes people. And especially in the corporate world, so many people it's just natural. It's natural to have a mask up because you're
Mm-hmm.
driving so hard, right?
Yeah.
You're driving so hard
Yeah.
and there's so much responsibility and there's so many things to do and you perform. Um, but when I'm locked in with someone that's across from me, that's what pulls the emotion out into the story because I give them space and I give them time. And that creates an emotional story. So whether it's something that's purposefully emotional or whether it's something that allows them to be funny or allows them to make a facial expression or fill the fill the dead space with something, um, I give them time and then we just record and then after the magic comes out and the editing, which is why I love working with you guys because you guys are geniuses. You and
Oh,
Danielle
thank you.
are geniuses at
Thank you,
editing.
Suzy.
So you're welcome. I love working with you because I can have
We
the
love
story
working
in
with you
my
too.
head, but you bring it together in a way that is significant.
Yeah. It's like we have a very, and talking about redundancy, but deep connection in terms of you're very good at finding the moments and the pieces in the content that actually is able to bridge uncertainties with clarity. It basically solves problems, you know, and at the same time, we package it in a way so that they come across the way they should. Um, I don't
Oh
like
yeah,
to
can
call it
we?
tactic. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go.
No, I wanted to say, can we tell them a little bit about how I don't know if people realize how important editing is. So
Mm-hmm.
I
It
love
is.
watching hours of footage
Yeah.
and pulling those bites out, pulling and for people that are doing this, for small businesses, the bites that are the most important are the ones that when you first watch it, they speak to you. You in your head say, "Oh, that's good," or "Oh, that something's off about that." You have to pay attention to those instincts, and then you pull out all the best bites, and then I hand it over to you, and you
Yeah.
create the magic.
And it's the opposite. I mean, for us is where we have we're in a time crunch every time, you know, because there's so many deadlines. And so for you to give us that input, you know, is such an asset. And it's not throwing you flowers just for the sake of it. It really is, because I mean, it's important to be able to have different eyes on a project at a technical level, a story level, concept level. And I think the more um, the more you center with different eyes in that project, it's the best because you're covering more. It's like if it's a team of people that is able to see different angles and then in the end get the best result possible. My next thing was, I don't like to call it tactics, but when you're looking at that, you know, from production, you basically plan your questions. You plan from A to Z where you want to go, right? And communicate. Are there any special tools you use to be able to just ask the right questions?
So, and the upfront, the no matter what I'm doing, I want to understand the strategy. So you mentioned the word tactic. That's important because I'll get clients that call me and say, "We want a podcast." And I say, "Great, let's talk about why." And really, I need to understand the strategy. What is the audience feeling? Whether it's an internal audience or external, what are they feeling? What do you want them to feel? And where are you now on that journey? And then you talk about potential tactics. It could be short videos, it could be a documentary, it could be a podcast, it could be a town hall, it could be messaging that can be pulled out for managers to connect with their teams. There's so many different tactics. The very first thing I do is understand why they think they want a certain tactic because
Mm-hmm.
we need to get to the root of what they're trying to solve for
Which
first.
not it doesn't necessarily have to be that tactic. Once you analyze, you say,
Correct.
well, you think you want, I mean, you want that, and you think this is the solution, but it's really not. Many times, that's what you're saying.
Yeah. And then also looking at the calendar, thinking about cadence. Essentially, at the beginning, I create a a comms plan, I calendar everything out. What else are these people receiving? What is special about this month? What is special about this quarter? So it's tying in everything else that's happening so that when you're creating this beautiful asset, it hits, it's appreciated. So what I do is I have that big conversation first. And usually we could do that in a day, in a workshop. You go in, you plot all this out. I love writing things on the wall and then coming up with a plan.
Yeah.
Then in pre-production, I look at I use AI, but I use it more in post than I do in pre. In pre, yeah.
No,
I
that's
mean,
great. That's my next question is going to be about that, but please continue and we'll jump to
yeah,
that.
I mean, AI is like, I love my 10 new assistants that I have, it saves so much time for me because it's the, so we'll talk about pre first, where I don't use it too much in pre at
Okay.
all because it's not sophisticated enough yet at this moment to give me exactly the questions that I like. So I look at the guest. For example, I just produced a podcast myself with the client last week, 2 weeks ago, and I basically used AI to help me organize, to give the questions to the host, to the host of the podcast. I was producing it, and when I ask AI I tell him these are the questions I think we should ask. Am I missing anything? This is the goal. What do you think? And it's usually needs massaging, but it does help me. In post is where the magic, where the deep appreciation for AI comes, because I could have like an episode title that I really like, but something might be off about it. So then I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? Give me 5 alternatives. Notes, obviously, I'll put the script in there and say, give me the top 5 sound bites if this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm trying to get at. So sometimes it's totally off. And other times it gives me a great suggestion. I go, oh yeah, I remember that soundbite is powerful. Let's use that. So I use AI as my assistant because it saves me so much time in the summarizing and in the just me thinking with myself.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. And the other day we interviewed the CEO of Lucy Hub, which is a company that merges that human factor and AI. And basically they have editors, but at the same time, they have certain tools specifically for pre-production that really help, which are more advanced, let's say ChatGPT. And it's great, because it helps definitely get deeper in the way that you don't like GPT. You're mentioning that it doesn't go, it's not as intuitive. And then, for example, in our case, Daniel's case and in my case, we use a lot of AI because we know exactly what proposals to make. But not being super specialist in language like you are, you know what I mean? Because you find the ways to say things so proper and so direct at the same time. We use it so that we can structure things in a better way, the way you probably would do it. It's almost like having in that moment, just for minutes, a Zuzy, you know what I mean? But it really helps us understand better how to communicate and to make it brief and to be able to see the different angles from. And financially, we're creating offering 3 different packages. Which one would give you this certain amount of benefits, that kind of thing, So I think AI, it's always an assistant of any sorts. And I love that you're using it because I think we need to adapt. I think Darwin said in a very cryptic or creepy, I don't know how to, any of the two, that the ones that survive the most are not the ones that are the strongest, but the ones that adapt the best to this world.
Yeah, I agree. I'm having fun with it. Yeah. Because again, things that would take me a long time, like for example, I ran a workshop last week and I had tons of notes on paper that we had on huge Post-it notes. And I spoke them into AI, and I was going through, I was getting things out of my head. So it was almost like I was dictating to someone. AI summarized it. And and then I edited it a little bit. So things that did not require a lot of thinking also just saved me a huge amount of time because I'm so busy,
Yeah.
and this frees me up for the creative parts.
Yeah.
So it's great.
And let's jump more to the end of the line with the documentary. So we have a history of working in specifically big doc. I mean, we work in so many. I mean, lately we worked in we've worked in so many with so many clients. It's just that I can't say their names either, but two which were more, you being the producer is Craving, Cuba, right? And the other one is From Harlem to Harvard, which was the most recent project we worked on. And
Yes. I'm so proud of it. Did I tell you we got into our first film festival?
yes, you did.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes,
I'm
you did.
waiting.
I
I'm
think.
waiting
Yeah.
for the others.
Tell me what each of those documentaries taught you in terms of storytelling. Probably you had an idea, and then suddenly the process taught you something new each time.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day about, I did a career day at my high school recently, and it was so sweet. I went to an all-girls school, and there were all these girls that were interested in film and came to my session. And the first thing I did was cross out the word film and write storytelling, right? So they wouldn't think it's just one thing. But they asked me, how did I fall into this? And I fell into it as an adult, but really I didn't. I was thinking about what inspired me to do this kind of work. When I was 13 years old, I remembered my first job. It was a summer going into high school. I worked at a law firm. It was my grandfather's best friend, and he said, give this young lady a job. She needs some work experience at 13, right? And my family's Cuban, and the lawyer did not speak Spanish, Mr. Spivak. And I remember I was filing, doing something very simple, and I was doing a good job. And he calls me into his office and he goes, Zuzelin, that's my formal name. I need you to translate for me. And there was a family there that only spoke Spanish. And he asked me at 13 to translate like what they were saying. And it was a terrible story. That's why they needed an attorney. I felt such a huge sense of responsibility to be able to not only translate, but to, what's the word I'm looking for? There's another word. So not only to translate, but to really share the essence of what they were conveying. Yes, because they needed help. And it was a great responsibility for me to interpret, literally and metaphorically. I needed to interpret what they were saying to this attorney so then he could help them. And then he used me many times after that. So I think that was the beginning, because every time I tell a story, I feel a great responsibility behind why I'm doing it. And Craving Cuba, which was my first feature film, I produced a cooking show before that. That was fun. But Craving Cuba was, a story about the complication, the complication behind Cuba and Cuban Americans, and like why it's complicated. And also it another
from
central,
a very personal perspective, from your own journey, which is
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So President Obama had just announced he wanted to normalize relations with Cuba. And I had already, produced a cooking show, and I had interviewed a lot of people, but I had never made an actual documentary. I was at Sundance. This was, I always went to the film festivals, and I saw other female filmmakers there. And I remember seeing this one director who happened to be, the Jennifer Siebel Newsom, which is Gavin Newsom's wife. She was showing her second documentary, I believe, called The Mask You Live In, which is about the media's effect on boys. And even though she comes from privilege, she had a lot of resources. I looked at her in that theater during the Q&A, and I felt like if she could do it, I could do it. So on my flight on the way home, I wrote on one page the idea behind Craving Cuba. And I felt a responsibility to tell this story, because people would ask me, like, what's the big deal? Like, why is this so complicated? So I went in to tell a story without a political agenda, because Cuba is also so political. And people told me, why are you doing this? It's like, this is, you shouldn't touch this subject. But I knew that my MO was not a political agenda. So I told the story. I just told the story, and I made sure it was balanced within the people that I interviewed here in the States. Um, so yeah, I wanted to to have people discover something new, and then Harlem to Harvard, we just finished it about a month and a half
Yeah,
ago.
we did.
It's a short, it's a documentary short. So this is also really good for small businesses, actually. So the board of directors there's a nonprofit in Harlem that
You see
it
how
was
good? Don't
founded.
lose your train of thought, please. Don't think about it. Think about it. You see, this is what I love. That was my next question. How to apply,
Uh-huh.
how to advise small businesses with these tips
Mm-hmm.
on how to, and you see my point, and I wouldn't do this with a
Uh-huh.
regular, but because this is our subject matter, how to connect, how to communicate. You see, you did it on your own. You connected this line, this point that we wanted to make with the next. And I was like, okay, I don't even need to ask it. She has it all in her mind, structured. So, but I need the audience to know that. So that's why I stopped you. But please go ahead.
Thank
So
you,
you were
Frank.
saying.
No, it's a perfect example of, because some people might not know, gosh, what am I going to do with the film in my company? It feels very like far-fetched and very indie festival kind of thing. So this is how this started. I met one of the board of directors for a nonprofit in Harlem, and he said to me, Susie, you do videos, right? Can you do a video for my website? And their website, needed some assets. And I looked at him and I said, this is such an incredible story. Please let me make a documentary short, because what we'll do is we'll use it as a strategy, not only to tell this amazing story, which I'll tell you what it's about in a second, but to bring it through film festivals to the audience that they need to reach, which is in the New York City, New Jersey, tri-state area. Bring it to children, to students, to young students, middle
Mm-hmm.
school students, and their families, and potential mentors and donors for the program. And they said yes. So that story is about a teacher from the 60s
Mm-hmm.
who was, from what I gather, he was eccentric. He was friends with, like, very intelligent, but also eccentric, friends with James Baldwin and Lena Horne and Picasso. And he was hanging out in Paris one summer, and he comes back to Harlem, and he noticed that many of his smartest and brightest students were being lost to the streets, and he couldn't take it, and he wanted to make a difference. So he started a nonprofit, and he looked around and he said, where can I make the biggest impact? Where do the smartest students go? Where do our future leaders go? And he saw there was a very big gap in the most elite schools in the country, the most elite boarding schools in the country. No Black or brown faces. And he made it his mission. So over the last 60 years, this gentleman and his organization sent over 600 students from Harlem and the tri-state area to the most elite boarding schools in the country, creating generational impact, creating generational impact. And
Change.
I could not resist. I had to ask, please let me make a documentary short, for all the reasons I mentioned before. But that's an example of a way that if a small business has a story or has different stories, everyone has stories. That's one way to bring awareness in a powerful way that connects the community.
And you know what you made me think as you were saying, we were just saying, which I loved, is that you were basically describing the reason why he was doing this. And I think if we can connect, if anything, is that that's the same thing that businesses can do. Sometimes people really want to know, what's the reason you created this product, or the way you are pushing out your services? Who are you? And why does it mean so much to you? And it doesn't have to be in every product video. Of course not. Our product video services that explain and go in detail. But once in a while, it's good to just show the culture behind, because I think when people really understand why somebody's doing something the way they're doing it and they connect, that's when they just can't stop having enough of you. At least that's why. And I think that's what I perceived that what really captured you from Harlem to Harvard was the story of this man wanting to create change because he saw this, how do you describe it? Hole or empty?
Yeah,
Empty?
a
Yeah,
gap. He
a
saw
gap.
this
Yeah.
incredible gap. And not
Yeah.
only his story,
Yeah.
but he passed away 10 years ago. The
Yeah.
story of his legacy. So connecting, what did it do to those students to have someone believe in them and give them support? What change and again, generational wealth did it create? Not just financially, because many of these students have gone on to, it's called Harlem to Harvard for a reason. One of the people I interview, and many of the students went to Harvard, but they also went to many other schools. So it's not necessarily about getting to the Ivy League, but it's about opportunity. And you can see what it means. So if there's a central theme, it's about believing in someone and giving them a chance and then allowing them to make a decision for themselves, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Greatly put, Susie. If anybody's going to start a business, even if it's small, because obviously you said that there's bridges between, the same way you do it for a big business or a small business, but specifically for small ones. And they want to get into, video, filmmaking, and specifically storytelling. How would they start? What would you tell them? Just the first small steps.
Yeah, I always like to put it into three buckets and share with them, have a conversation with them about why this is important, right? So the first thing that's always a barrier is budget, right? However, doing a 1-day workshop or a few hours of a workshop to get inside the founder's head or the small business head and let them see what the opportunity is, and they can decide which tactics, as we're talking about, are most worth it or priority. But I always focus on three things. One, strategy, understanding what their business is and who their audience is, again, internal or external. Two, it's authenticity, right? What we're creating is authenticity. So does what their strategy is or what they say connect with who they really are? The audience needs to feel like those two things are connected. And it could be the CEO, like Sarah Blake, the founder of Spanx. I love her, and she feels like she's so her brand and she's so authentic and fun to listen to. But it could be other people, it could be employees within the company. And three, it's connection. It's creating that connection. So strategy, authenticity, and then connection. And that connection turns into the communications plan or the connecting the dots literally from the story to the audience. So that's where I tell them that they should start. And they could literally have, can you tell I like big Post-it notes? I'm like, I have big Post-it notes or whiteboard. You could use a whiteboard, but there's something about like tactically writing things, and it's different than just typing it onto your
When
laptop.
you're
I love it.
prepping and I've seen you, you look like an FBI agent of amazing content. Yeah, all across the board. You just need the strings, the red strings. That's the only thing you need. But instead of
It
being,
looks
unsubs and, it's really, really great storytelling. And I've seen you do it. So it's amazing how you do it.
Because sometimes you have to go into your brain. You have to go deeper into the layers. What's on the surface is too obvious. So you have to peel back the onion. And the way you do that is by going deeper and sort of design thinking your way around what you think it is, just looking at it from all different angles. And it may end up there, but usually it ends up in a more refined place.
Yes.
So so they can do that with themselves, It's great when I come in and facilitate because I'm removed. So I can probe and ask questions that can reveal so much.
You're not so emotionally attached or fearful of any loss And when I mean loss is, what is this going to take? Oh, am I going to look bad? You're kind of a filter, and I've seen you do it. Which filter? No, 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 no. You look great. I think this is where we're lacking, and it's more about how you're telling it and the reasons behind it. And then you kind of clear that out, through the whatever media it is, because I've seen you do it in podcasts, I've seen you do it in films, I've seen you do it in videos that are corporate. Yeah. Because they're definitely for different institutions that really, really, really want people to have a not a lesson, but I want to to change the mindset of people towards a problem, no matter what it is, And we recently did one, and it was amazing because we brought out the best of a group of women that had a lot to say. Let's just leave it there. But it was amazing. You always do the same thing.
And for that one, they just did a virtual screening and had a huge turnout, and it was so successful.
Really?
So yeah, I'm really proud of that work we did together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Susy, thank you. I was so nervous because I know you have such a complex schedule. So I was like, oh my God, am I going to get her? I'm not going to get her. I need the audience to see basically what I see in you. And not only that, but the lessons we've basically learned together, across the years, with different projects. So thank you for being here. You are an amazing collaborator, an amazing filmmaker, an amazing advertiser, because even when you're not thinking about it, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, you just did that out of the whim. So so
Frank, I appreciate you so much. And this is what it's about. It's about working with people that you respect and admire, and that they have strengths that you don't, and vice versa, because that makes it better. But thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Come on. Always, thank you. Have a beautiful week. And I hope that everything you do from now on keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger, and more successful and successful and more successful. Thank you, Susy.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thank you. You heard her, guys. And just in case, I'm going to repeat what she said at the beginning of this episode. Strategy, authenticity, and connection. Those are the three pillars so that your stories transcend, and so your marketing efforts really make a difference. Please don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, like this podcast so we can bring you the best experts in future episodes and seasons.